Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to recommend a few starting and bench options for most of the teams. I think some teams already have their team set up just the way I pretty much would agree with, and I'll say who those are, and then I'll go through the guys that I think have a few swaps I'd recommend for the week in their lineups, and then I'll also go over a few free agents at every position that I'd recommend keeping an eye on if you guys are interested. Alright, let's get right into it. Now to kick things off, Pussy, Mr. Steeler, Toxic, Rictatorship, and Karen. I think all of you, in terms of what you have on your roster, I don't really think there's anything you can do in terms of substitutions to make it any better. You know, all of you, I think, could pick up a few free agents or something to make it better, but I'm just talking about guys on your roster. I don't really think there's much you could do differently. Um, let's kick things off here with MILF. Now, with MILF, I actually recommend that MILF benches Brandon Cooks, who's going against the New York Jets. Now, Brandon Cooks is the wide receiver, too, on this Cowboys offense. Now, keep in mind this. Brandon Cooks is going to be coming off of a knee injury if he even plays. But say he does play, this is the New York Jets defense that shut down Gabriel Davis almost entirely for the last week's game. This is a very good Jets defense. They might have lost Aaron Rodgers, but nothing has changed about this defense. I think Brandon Cooks is probably going to struggle. I would actually start Jerry Jeudy in his place. Now, Jerry Jeudy is another one coming off of an injury going up against a very tough defense. However, I think he'll still do better than Brandon Cooks overall. Jerry Jeudy's just the better fantasy player usually. Usually he's getting a lot more targets regardless of the matchup. I think he'll do better. Plus, the Jets have way better cornerbacks than the Broncos do, other than Pat Surtain. Um, and that's the only thing I'd recommend changing for this week for you. Next up, we have Booty Basher. Booty Basher, I would recommend you bench Sky Moore for Gabriel Davis. Now, Josh Allen played like shit against the Jets on Monday night, but I think this week he'll do really good. This is one of the worst defenses, if not the worst defense in football with these Raiders. Overall, I think putting in Gabe Davis, I think it'll be a high-scoring shootout for the... Well, not a shootout, but I think it'll be a high-scoring day for the Bills offense. I think Gabe Davis might have a touchdown. He might do pretty good. Sky Moore just has so much competition with all these other receivers. If Kels comes back, I really don't see him being startable. I'd also recommend putting in Green Bay's defense because here's the thing. They might be argued as worse in terms of in terms of their defense compared to Cincinnati, but Cincinnati's playing a very high-powered Ravens offense, while they're also missing their safeties from the offseason, Jesse Bates and Von Bell. But Green Bay, they're playing a very weakened Atlanta. Atlanta's offense is not that good. Overall, I think I would much rather prefer the matchup between Green Bay and Atlanta. Next up with Big Yawners. With Big Yawners, I would actually recommend you bench Gus Edwards. I would put Zach Moss in there at the Gus Edwards spot, and then I would start Christian Kirk. Now, it was just 1 week of him doing bad. I don't think that's going to be a common trend. I think he'll at least be a flex option wide receiver coming in on forward games. I don't think he'll do nearly as bad. I would strongly recommend starting him over Gus Edwards, who's going to be sharing the backfield with at least two other running backs, a scrambling quarterback, a team that just has so many weapons to use. I don't like Gus Edwards here or Justice Hill. So I would recommend going with Christian Kirk. I think that game's going to be a shootout game, and I think Christian Kirk has a lot of chances to get some good points. Coming up next, I have Scrambled and Wiggle Waggle, who I would actually recommend that you bench Jack Campbell, the rookie linebacker, because he is a rookie. He's playing limited snaps. He's not necessarily the greatest yet. I would actually bench him for Pete Werner. I'm not saying to drop Campbell, but I would say to bench him until you start seeing consistency out of him, which I don't think is going to happen for a few weeks here. Warner's playing against Carolina, one of the most run-heavy offenses in the league behind Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard. So overall, I think Pete Warner's going to do a lot more consistent and probably a lot better, at least for this week. And I thought about it, maybe Shaq Thompson over Quay Walker, but I'm not going to say for sure on that one just because here's the thing. Quay Walker did really good last week in terms of fantasy, but he only had 4 tackles total, which is very concerning. But you can keep him in. Maybe he can get more this week. But Shaq Thompson's probably going to be the safer bet, so it's just a matter of personal preference there. Next up, we have PMC Wagner. I would recommend starting Garrett Wilson over Kadarius Toney. Here's the thing, you're projected to win by around 100 points. You just want consistency. You don't need anything crazy. You don't need a crazy game. You just need a guy who can catch the football and who can get open. I think Zach Wilson is going to eventually find a way to get the ball to Wilson, even though he's not going to be any elite option like he was before. You know what I mean? Let's get into the free agents. That's pretty much all I had to recommend in terms of starting and benching based on your rosters. Now with the quarterbacks, there really isn't much to choose from when it comes to these quarterbacks. You got Mr. Clean down there at Josh Dobbs, the MILF Smasher, all of them. But overall, the number one guy I'd say to keep an eye out on is Mac Jones. He's probably the most consistent out of the 5 options there. And there is one thing, or one stat that I really think needs to be looked at. I don't even know if Yahoo shows you this. Let me see. I don't know. I don't think Yahoo actually shows you. I believe he had 54 pass attempts last week. That is insane. Any quarterback that's getting that many pass attempts, that is a very good sign for quarterbacks if you need him in terms of fantasy. That means he's getting a lot of chances to score you points. And then number 2, these guys are all kind of jokers, but if I had to choose any of them, I chose C.J. Stroud just because he's a rookie. He's probably going to be getting better as the games go on. Plus, he has a favorable, or not a favorable matchup, but a good testable matchup against Indianapolis. So I'd say, if anyone, him. I don't like any of the other 3 at all, to be honest. But at least C.J. Stroud has upside. Mac Jones is probably by far the most consistent one. Looking at running backs, I actually have Deion Jackson for the Colts. He's going to be splitting the backfield with Zach Moss. It's going to be interesting to see who gets what types of snaps. Now that they're both playing, Deion Jackson might play like shit. He might come in and actually steal the show. Who knows? This is why I'm saying just keep an eye on these guys. I'm not saying to necessarily pick them up yet. Just keep a close eye on these guys, see what they do, and then kind of make the call from there if you think you're interested in any of these positions. But overall, if he ends up, say, doing really well, he might be a plug-and-play for future weeks. And then I actually have Cordero Patterson. Now, you can see in this report here, I think it was the Joker they were calling him whenever I was reading news reports a few weeks ago. Cordero Patterson missed week 1 to an injury. He used to be the running back for Atlanta, but since they got Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, they're probably not going to use him as a running back. But as I said, they're going to use him as a joker role. Now, my interpretation of this is this could mean that they're using him as a wide receiver, a tight end, or running back. He could be doing everything. He could be like a Taysom Hill out there, which means he might have a lot of opportunities to score you fantasy points. Not only that, he's also doing kick returns and punt returns, and he is undisputedly the best kick and punt returner since Devin Hester, which will score you points in this fantasy league. So I know they're not great options, but they are probably the best 2 options you have on this free agency list. I do think there is some good upside with Cordero Patterson, depending on how much he's actually used. Let's look at the receivers. I have Allen Robinson for the Steelers. Deontay Johnson just went down with an injury. So now we're going to have Allen Robinson as the new wide receiver, too, for the Steelers. He's expected to take on a much bigger role. For those of you who've watched Allen Robinson, you know how good he was before he went to the Rams. He was great on the Bears, great on the Jaguars. Overall, he has a lot of upside here, at least compared to most of these other guys on the free agency. He definitely has the upside, and it's not even close compared to any of these other guys. I think he'll definitely be the most consistent option you can get on here, too, if he decides to actually try. He kind of gave up when he was playing for the Rams. And then I actually have Robert Woods as well. He's kind of the same situation where he used to be a really good receiver. He's going in on a new team, and last week he actually did pretty good. He had about 13 points. So overall, if he can find a way to be C.J. Stroud's wide receiver one, he could actually be fantasy usable. Overall, I think these are probably the best options you have. There's a high risk guy in Tutu Atwell, but especially for this week against the Niners, I don't see him doing much. That defense is just too good. Looking in at the tight end spot, I have Adam Troutman at number one. Or actually, no, I have Zach Ertz at number one. Here's the thing. I think Zach Ertz will be the long-term tight end, the best tight end on this free agency. For now, while Colt McCoy is in, don't worry about Zach Ertz. He's going to be dog shit. We all know he's going to be dog shit. Colt McCoy's not going to be able to get that team down there to score points. He's not going to be able to get the ball spread around. It's just not going to be good. But when you see Kyler Murray coming back, I could see Zach Ertz actually coming in and taking in a lot of touchdowns, getting a lot of targets from Kyler Murray. It's what happened last year. The only exception is that they do have a rookie tight end this year, which might affect it. Just keep a close eye on him. And then there's Adam Troutman, who was the number one tight end for Denver last week. They just cut a tight end. And now it's between him and Albert O, I believe. Or no, it's Greg Dulcich, my bad. Either way, he's their new number one tight end, so keep an eye on him. He could be really good. He might not be that great, but just keep an eye on him. Next up, we got the team defense. I would recommend, if you want a defense this specific week, take a look at Indianapolis, first of all, because they went against Jacksonville and did really well at holding them off overall. And then I'd also look at New York, who's going against Colt McCoy and the blowjobs, or whatever the hell you want to call that team. That team is horrible. But overall, New York going against Dallas, I don't think they're nearly as bad as that game made them out to be. They're definitely not as bad as Arizona. So they're definitely worth a look if you're looking for a defense to plug in this week. With kickers, we have Brett Maher, who's the Rams kicker. If the Rams can keep scoring a lot of points and getting a lot of field goals like they did last week, Brett Maher might have some of the best upside remaining out of these guys. And then there's also Blake Groupie for the Saints. Now you see just two spots above him, Will Lutz. The Saints have always been one of the most consistent field goal teams in the league, meaning they don't score a lot of touchdowns. They usually get a lot of field goals. So I think he'll be the new Will Lutz. I think he'll actually be one of the top 10 kickers in the league. I'm fairly certain on that one. Just keep an eye on him as the year goes on. He's a rookie, I believe. But it's very hard to predict kickers, if I'm being honest. I'm just going off of what you've seen in years past. DBs, I actually have both of the Dolphin safeties. Javon Holland, I believe he had 14 tackles in total for the win against the Chargers. He had 10 tackles solo, 4 assists. 14 tackles solo is green flags all around. If you're putting up that many tackles, that's a very good defensive back to have. And then the other one I actually have is Deshaun Elliott, who is the other Dolphins safety. They were out there being tackle city on everyone. The Dolphins don't really have a main middle linebacker right now. So these safeties are just kind of going wild, making tackles left and right, especially with Ramsey out. Their corners are all getting burnt. Keep an eye on both of them. I think they're both going to be high-scoring DBs. Next up, looking at the D-line, I actually have Jermaine Johnson for the Jets, who's going into his second year. He was dealing with injuries all year last year, and this year he's able to go in on that D-line uncontested. He did very good. I think he got to Josh Allen twice in last week's matchup against the Bills, and Josh Allen has always been a very hard quarterback to get to when it comes to real life, so I think he could have a lot of upside. Also, keep an eye out for Jeffrey Simmons. 2 years ago, Jeffrey Simmons was one of the best scoring defensive linemen in the league. I don't know exactly where he was placing, but he was very good. And then he started dealing with injuries last year and just kind of played like shit. But if last week's anything to go off of, he seemed like he was going back to his old ways where he got a sack. He was doing all sorts of good stuff. Next up, we're going to look at linebackers. Now, Jordan Hicks already played. I would have told you to put him at number one if he hadn't. So, yeah, if you didn't see the other video, definitely take a look at Jordan Hicks. He's amazing in terms of these linebackers on free agency. Anyway, I have Quincy Williams, who popped off for the Jets. He actually just got paid by the Jets too before this game happened against the Bills. And yeah, he proceeded to put up 10 tackles, did very good. Overall, 9 tackles solo, and assist. He did very good regardless of having C.J. Mosley to deal with. And then I also have Demario Davis, who for years has been one of the most consistent linebackers in fantasy. I'm not saying he's going to put up 22 points every week, but he'll be a very safe bet for around 12 to 15 or so, if not more, every single week. He's a very safe bet. He's a very good linebacker to have if you're looking for a good linebacker in fantasy or a good consistent guy. Overall, this video is recommended by PMC Wagner. Give him a good shout out. Tell him thank you if you found any of this useful. This was all his idea. And I'll catch you guys later.